30 minutes after I refused to switch airplane seats with a crying stranger, federal agents stormed our plane, and I realized that woman wasn't trying to scam me. She was trying to save my life. I'm Vanessa Torres. I'm 32 years old. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and I've been flying alone for work for the past 5 years. I know every airport scam in the book, the fake charity collectors, the broken taxi meters, the people who claim they need money for a bus ticket home. I've seen it all, and I never fall for it. My dad, Robert, raised me to be smart, to be cautious, to trust my instincts. He's a retired firefighter, and he always told me that the world has good people and bad people, and your job is to know the difference before it's too late. On September 14th, I thought I knew the difference. I thought I was making the smart choice. I was so incredibly wrong. If you want to hear how a $500 offer and a window seat almost cost me my life, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It was 6:15 in the morning at JFK Airport in New York, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep and bad airport coffee. I'd been in Manhattan for 3 days at a design conference, one of those industry events where you network until your face hurts from fake smiling, and your phone is full of business cards you'll probably never look at again. But it had gone well, really well. I'd landed 2 new clients, both with decent budgets, and I was feeling good about the trip. Now I just wanted to go home to Phoenix, sleep in my own bed, and have Sunday breakfast with my dad like we did every week. I was dragging my carry-on through Terminal 4, dodging other exhausted travelers, checking my phone every few seconds, even though I knew exactly where I needed to be. Gate B7, flight 2847 to Phoenix. Boarding at 7, departure at 7:30. My dad had texted me the night before. Safe travels tomorrow, Mija. Can't wait to hear about the conference. Proud of you. I'd read that text about 15 times. My dad wasn't big on words, but when he said something, he meant it. I made it through security without any issues, grabbed another terrible coffee because I was still barely awake, and headed to my gate. The waiting area was packed with people in that specific state of travel exhaustion, where everyone looks slightly dead inside. Business travelers typing on laptops, families trying to keep kids entertained, a guy sleeping across 3 chairs with a jacket over his face. I found a spot near the window and sat down, pulling out my tablet to review some client notes. But honestly, I couldn't focus. My brain was fried. I just wanted to get on the plane, put in my headphones, and sleep through the whole flight. When they called my boarding group, Group 3, I was one of the first people in line. I'd paid extra for seat 12A, a window seat, specifically because I like to lean against the wall and sleep. Middle seats are torture. Aisle. Seats mean getting bumped by every person and cart going down the aisle. Window seats are perfect. I made my way down the narrow airplane aisle, squeezing past people shoving bags into overhead bins, apologizing as my carry-on bumped against armrests. Finally, I reached row 12, my row, my window seat. I lifted my bag into the overhead compartment, slid into my seat, and immediately started setting up my little sleep nest. Neck pillow positioned just right, headphones within easy reach, phone switched to airplane mode, jacket folded up to use as an extra cushion. I was just pulling out my water bottle when I noticed someone standing in the aisle next to me. It was a woman, probably late 40s, with messy blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that looked like it had been done in a hurry. She had red, puffy eyes like she'd been crying recently, and she was wearing jeans and an oversized gray sweater. She clutched a phone in one hand and a crumpled boarding pass in the other. "Excuse me," she said, and her voice was shaky, uncertain. "Are you in seat 12A?" I nodded, already feeling that familiar sense of annoyance. I knew exactly where this was going. Someone always wants to switch seats. Someone always has a reason why they need your seat specifically. "Yes, this is 12A," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. The woman shifted her weight from foot to foot. "I know this is a huge ask, and I'm so sorry to bother you, but would you be willing to switch seats with me?" Here we go, I thought. "Where's your seat?" I asked. 27C, she said quietly. "It's a middle seat near the back." Of course it was. Nobody ever wants to trade a good seat for a good seat. It's always someone with a terrible seat asking for your good seat. I'm sorry, I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. I really want to keep my window seat. I paid extra for it. Her face did this thing where it just crumpled, like I'd physically hurt her. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and for a second I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it away. I'd learned a long time ago that you can't let people guilt trip you into giving up things you paid for. Please, she said, and now her voice was breaking. I know it's not a fair trade. I'll pay you $500 cash right now. I just really need to sit in this seat instead of mine. I stared at her. $500? To switch from a window seat to a middle seat in the back of the plane? That made no sense. That wasn't normal. Every alarm bell my father had ever installed in my head started ringing. This was a scam. It had to be. Maybe she wanted to steal something from my bag while I was moving. Maybe this was some elaborate distraction while an accomplice did something. Maybe the cash was fake. I didn't know what the angle was, but there was definitely an angle. That's very generous, I said carefully, but I'm going to stay in my assigned seat. The woman's tears were falling freely now, running down her cheeks. She wiped at them with the back of her hand, but more kept coming. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising slightly. Please, I'm begging you. Something bad is going to happen and I can't be in this seat. Please just take the money and switch with me. Other passengers were starting to notice now. A man across the aisle was watching us. A woman 2 rows up had turned around to see what the commotion was about. I felt my face getting hot. I hate being the center of attention. And this woman was creating a scene. My dad's voice echoed in my head. The same lessons he'd been teaching me since I was old enough to understand. Don't let strangers manipulate you. Don't fall for sob stories. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And this felt very, very wrong. I'm not switching seats, I said, more firmly this time. And you need to find your assigned seat because they're about to close the doors. The woman, Linda, stood there in the aisle staring at me with this look of pure desperation that made my stomach twist. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her boarding pass, and I could see other passengers starting to whisper to each other, pointing in our direction. A flight attendant in a navy blue uniform was making her way down the aisle toward us, her professional smile already fixed in place. Linda saw her coming too, and something like panic flashed across her face. Please, she said one more time, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. You're making a terrible mistake. I'm trying to help you. That seat, there's something wrong with that seat. I can't tell you everything, but you have to trust me. Trust her? I didn't even know her. And now she was talking about something being wrong with the seat, which sounded even more like a manipulation tactic. What could possibly be wrong with an airplane seat? This was getting more ridiculous by the second. The flight attendant arrived with that practiced calm that airline workers use when dealing with difficult situations. Is everything all right here, ladies? She asked, her eyes moving between me and Linda. Linda turned to her, and I watched her face transform from desperate to almost frantic. I need to switch seats with this woman. It's extremely important. I'll pay her. I'll pay extra, whatever it takes. I just need to be in seat 12A instead of my assigned seat. The flight attendant's smile became a little more strained. Ma'am, do you have a medical condition that requires a specific seat? Do you need special accommodation for a disability? Linda hesitated, and I could see her trying to figure out what to say. No, not exactly. But there's a situation, and I really need to sit here. The flight attendant glanced at me. Are you willing to switch seats with this passenger? I shook my head. No, I'd like to stay in my assigned seat. I watched the flight attendant's expression shift into professional problem-solving mode. I'm very sorry, ma'am, but all passengers must remain in their assigned seats unless there's a documented medical or safety issue. If this passenger doesn't wish to switch, I cannot force her to do so. You'll need to take your assigned seat so we can prepare for departure. Linda's face went pale. She looked at me one more time, and I saw something in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe, or resignation. My name is Linda Marsh, she said, speaking directly to me, ignoring the flight attendant completely. Please remember that name. When this is over, remember that I tried to warn you. Remember that I begged you to listen." Then she turned and walked toward the back of the plane, her shoulders shaking with what looked like sobs. I watched her disappear down the aisle, weaving between other passengers who were still boarding. The flight attendant gave me an apologetic smile and lowered her voice. "I'm so sorry about that. Some passengers get very anxious about flying, especially if they've had bad experiences. Try not to let it ruin your flight." She moved on to help someone else with their luggage, and I sat there feeling strange and unsettled. The logical part of my brain said I'd done the right thing. You don't give in to emotional manipulation. You don't switch seats with crying strangers offering suspicious amounts of money. You protect yourself. But another part of me kept replaying the look on Linda's face, the genuine terror in her eyes, the way she'd said, "Remember my name," like it was some kind of warning or prophecy. I pulled out my phone before switching it to airplane mode and quickly typed Linda Marsh into Google. Nothing useful came up. No news articles, no obvious social media profiles, nothing that would explain why this woman was so desperate to sit in my seat. The plane was filling up now, more passengers streaming down the aisle, stuffing bags overhead, settling into their seats. I put my phone away and tried to shake off the weird feeling. I told myself that by tomorrow, this would just be a strange story to tell my dad over breakfast. The crazy lady on the plane who offered me $500 to switch seats. We'd probably laugh about it. The cabin door closed with that heavy thunk that means you're really committed now. The flight attendants started their safety demonstration. I put in my headphones but didn't turn on any music yet. My heart was still beating too fast. The plane began to taxi away from the gate, that familiar rumble of the engines starting up. The slow roll toward the runway. I kept thinking about Linda's words. Something bad is going to happen. What did that even mean? Bad turbulence? A long delay? Or was she just trying to scare me into giving up my seat? I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the window, trying to calm down. In a few hours, I'd be home. This would all be over. Everything would be fine. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew something was very wrong. The plane taxied for what felt like forever, making these slow turns that didn't feel like the usual path to the runway. I'd flown this route enough times to know roughly how long it should take to get from the gate to takeoff, and we were already past that point. I pulled out one earbud and listened, trying to figure out if something was off or if I was just being paranoid after that weird encounter with Linda. Other passengers seemed unconcerned, most of them absorbed in their phones during those final seconds before we'd have to switch to airplane mode, or already dozing off with their heads against the windows. Then the pilot's voice came through the speakers, that calm, professional tone that pilots use even when things aren't going well. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor technical delay. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll have more information for you shortly." A technical delay. I'd heard that phrase before on other flights, and usually it meant something small, some indicator light that needed checking or some routine procedure that hadn't been completed properly. Nothing to worry about, except my heart was pounding, and I couldn't shake the image of Linda's terrified face. The plane made another turn, sharper this time, and I realized with growing dread that we weren't heading toward the runway anymore. We were turning around. We were going back. I pressed my face against the window and watched as we slowly made our way back toward the terminal. The morning sun was fully up now, glinting off other planes parked at their gates, and everything looked so normal, so routine, that I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. The pilot came back on the intercom, and this time I could hear the tension underneath his professional calm. "Folks, we're returning to the gate. We need to address a maintenance issue before departure. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your patience." Groans and complaints rippled through the cabin. I heard someone behind me say they were going to miss their connection. A businessman across the aisle was already typing furiously on his phone, probably emailing his office about the delay, but all I could think about was Linda saying, "Something bad is going to happen." And now we were going back to the gate, and maintenance issues don't usually require a full return unless something is actually wrong. The plane crawled back to a gate, and I watched through the window as ground crew rushed around, connecting equipment, doing things I didn't understand. The seatbelt sign finally turned off, and passengers immediately started standing up, stretching, checking their phones, complaining about the delay. But before anyone could actually move toward the exits, the pilot's voice cut through the cabin noise, and this time, there was no mistaking the seriousness. Ladies and gentlemen, remain in your seats. Do not stand up. Do not gather your belongings. Stay seated and follow all crew instructions. Immediately, the cabin went completely silent. You could feel the shift in energy, everyone suddenly alert and nervous. This wasn't a normal maintenance delay. Something was actually wrong. The forward cabin door opened, and instead of seeing airline staff or mechanics, I saw 3 people in dark suits step onto the plane. They moved with purpose, scanning the rows of passengers, speaking quietly into radio devices on their wrists. These weren't airline employees. These were federal agents. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. One of them, an Asian woman probably in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a tight bun, walked straight down the aisle. She was looking at seat numbers, checking something on a tablet she carried, and my hand started shaking because I knew, somehow I just knew, that she was coming for me. She stopped at row 12. She stopped at my row. Her eyes locked onto mine, and she said in a calm, authoritative voice that somehow made everything more terrifying, "Ma'am, are you seated in 12A?" I couldn't make my voice work. I just nodded. "I need you to gather your belongings and come with me right now." My brain couldn't process what was happening. I fumbled with my seatbelt with shaking hands, nearly dropping my phone as I shoved it in my pocket. "What's going on?" I managed to ask. "Did I do something wrong?" The agent didn't answer my question. She just stepped back slightly to let me into the aisle, her hand hovering near her side in a way that made me think she was armed. As I stood up on legs that felt like they might give out, I looked toward the back of the plane and saw Linda. Another agent was standing next to her seat, speaking to her quietly. Linda's eyes met mine across all those rows of passengers, and the expression on her face was something I'll never forget. Relief mixed with sadness, mixed with something that looked almost like an apology. The agent touched my elbow gently but firmly, guiding me toward the front of the plane. Every passenger was staring at me, and I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I walked that endless walk up the aisle. What had I done? What was happening? And why did Linda look at me like she'd just saved my life? They took me off the plane into the jetway where more agents were waiting, all of them wearing the same serious expressions and dark suits that made my heart race even faster. Agent Chen, the woman who'd pulled me from my seat, guided me through the terminal with a firm hand on my elbow, moving quickly past confused travelers who stopped to stare. We ended up in a small airport security office that I didn't even know existed, tucked away behind the ticketing counters. The room was cramped and fluorescent lit, with a metal table, a few plastic chairs, and no windows. Agent Chen gestured for me to sit, and I collapsed into the chair because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Another agent brought me a bottle of water, and I took it with, shaking hands, unable to open it. Agent Chen sat across from me, her expression softening slightly as she seemed to register how terrified I was. "Ms. Torres, I'm Agent Chen with the FBI. You're not in trouble. I need you to understand that first. You are not in any trouble." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed up completely. "A woman approached you before takeoff about switching seats, is that correct?" Agent Chen asked. I found my voice finally, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, Linda something. Linda Marsh. She wanted me to switch seats with her. She offered me $500. I said no." Agent Chen exchanged a look with another agent standing by the door, and I saw something pass between them, some unspoken communication that made my stomach twist even more. "Ms. Torres, Linda Marsh's husband was murdered 6 weeks ago. He was a witness in a major federal case against a criminal organization involved in smuggling and contract killings. Before he died, he told Linda that the organization had people everywhere, that they would come after her next to stop her from testifying." The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Agent Chen continued, her voice measured and careful. Linda has been in our protective custody since her husband's death. She had to fly today for a court appearance, and we took every precaution. We booked her under an alias, used a different identity, covered all our bases, but somehow they found out. This morning we received intelligence that there was a credible and immediate threat against her life on this specific flight. My mind was racing, trying to understand what this had to do with me, why federal agents had pulled me off a plane, why Linda had been so desperate for my seat. Agent Chen seemed to read my confusion because she pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. On the screen was a photo of an airplane seat, specifically the armrest of seat 12A, my seat. And inside the armrest, visible in the photo where someone had pried it open, was a small device with wires and what looked like a tiny container of liquid. Our bomb squad found this 45 minutes ago, Agent Chen said quietly. It's not a bomb in the traditional sense. It's a toxin delivery system, incredibly sophisticated. It was designed to release a fatal nerve agent directly into the breathing space of whoever was sitting in that seat. The timer was set to activate 20 minutes into the flight, when the plane would be at cruising altitude, too high to make an emergency landing in time to save you. I stared at the image, unable to process what I was seeing. That had been inches from my body, inches from my face. I would have been breathing normally, maybe sleeping, and then poison would have been released directly into my lungs. You would have been dead within minutes, another agent said from behind me, and it would have looked like a sudden medical emergency, heart attack, stroke, aneurysm. They're extremely good at making murders look natural. I thought I might throw up. Agent Chen gave me a moment, then continued. Linda Marsh somehow figured out what they'd planned. We're still investigating how she got the information, but we believe someone inside the organization who was having second thoughts tipped her off. She knew they'd planted something in seat 12A, the seat we'd assigned to her under her alias. She tried to warn us, tried to tell her handlers that something was wrong, but we thought she was experiencing trauma-related paranoia. We didn't take the threat seriously enough. I finally understood. The desperate crying, the offer of money, the cryptic warnings about something bad happening. Linda had known there was a poison device in that seat, and she'd been trying to save my life. When you refused to switch seats, Agent Chen said, Linda had a choice. She could sit in her decoy seat in the back, stay quiet, and let you die. Or she could break protocol, cause a scene, and force us to investigate. She chose to save you, even though it meant exposing herself, compromising the entire case, and putting herself in even more danger than before. Tears were streaming down my face now. I'd thought she was trying to scam me. I'd been so sure I was smarter than her, so convinced I was making the right choice. And she'd been trying to save my life while I'd looked at her with suspicion and refused to help. Where is she now? I managed to ask. Being relocated to an even more secure facility. The people who did this now know for certain that she's alive and still cooperating with us. She's in more danger than she's ever been. Agent Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Ms. Torres, Linda Marsh sacrificed her safety, her security, and potentially her future to save a complete stranger. You're alive right now because she refused to let you die in her place. I spent the next 6 hours at JFK Airport, being interviewed by what felt like every federal agency in existence. FBI agents asked me to describe every detail of my conversation with Linda, every word she'd said, every expression on her face. TSA officials wanted to know if I'd noticed anything suspicious when I boarded, anyone watching me, anyone acting strangely near my seat. Homeland Security took my fingerprints to eliminate them from the crime scene investigation. They went through my luggage piece by piece, documenting everything, making sure I hadn't unknowingly carried anything dangerous onto that plane. By the time they finished with me, the sun was setting and I was so exhausted I could barely think straight. They rebooked me on a morning flight and put me up in an airport hotel, all paid for by the government. I sat alone in that generic hotel room and called my dad, and the second I heard his voice, I completely broke down. I almost died today, Dad, I sobbed into the phone, and I was too stubborn to see that someone was trying to help me. Everything you taught me about being careful and not trusting strangers almost got me killed. My dad caught the next available flight to New York. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for me to say I needed him. He just came. When I walked into the hotel lobby the next morning, he was sitting there waiting for me, and he held me for a long time without saying a word. The media picked up the story within days, though the FBI tried to control what information got released to protect Linda and the ongoing investigation. Headlines screamed about the hero woman who'd saved a stranger's life by refusing to stay quiet. Linda's face was everywhere, though they tried to blur it in most photos. I was identified only as the intended victim in most reports, which was fine by me. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to understand how I'd gotten everything so wrong. The criminal organization was dismantled over the following months. 12 people were arrested on charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to weapons trafficking. Linda testified against all of them, her face disguised on video conference, her voice altered to protect her identity. I was called to testify too, and I sat in that courtroom describing the desperate woman who'd offered me $500 to switch seats, the woman I'd dismissed as a scammer. The defense attorneys tried to suggest Linda had been unstable, that maybe the device had been planted by someone else, that there was reasonable doubt about the whole thing, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forensics team had traced the components of the toxin delivery system back to a supplier connected to the organization. They had communications between the conspirators discussing the plan. They had financial transactions showing payment for the hit. Justice was served, but it felt empty. Linda would spend the rest of her life in witness protection, always looking over her shoulder, never able to go back to her old life. And I would spend the rest of mine wondering what other warnings I'd missed, what other moments of grace I'd rejected, because I was too afraid to trust. 3 weeks after that terrible day, I received a letter forwarded through the FBI. It was from Linda, written from somewhere secret, somewhere safe. "Dear Vanessa," it began, "I'm sorry I scared you that day. I'm sorry I couldn't just tell you the truth, but I knew if I explained everything, you'd think I was insane and we'd both end up dead. I just needed you to move, to not be in that seat when that thing activated. I understand why you didn't trust me. I wouldn't have trusted me either, standing there crying and offering money like some kind of crazy person. But I couldn't let you die. My husband died trying to do the right thing, trying to stand up against terrible people. I couldn't let his death be meaningless. I couldn't let them win by taking another innocent life. You remind me of my daughter. She's about your age, smart, and independent and careful about trusting people. Those are good qualities. They keep you safe most of the time, just not that time. I hope you're living your life fully now. I hope you're not letting fear control you. That's all any of us can do in the end. Stay vigilant, but don't let the bad people make you forget that good people exist too. Take care of yourself. Linda." I keep that letter in my desk drawer at home. I've read it so many times the paper is starting to wear thin at the creases. It reminds me of something important, something I'd forgotten in all those years of protecting myself and staying safe. My dad taught me to be careful, to watch out for scammers and manipulators, and those lessons saved me countless times. But they almost killed me too, because sometimes the person crying in front of you isn't trying to manipulate you. Sometimes they're carrying a burden you can't imagine. Sometimes they're trying to save your life at great cost to themselves. 6 months after that flight, I'm on another airplane heading to Seattle for a conference. I'm in seat 18C, a middle seat, because all the good seats were taken. A woman in the aisle asks if I'd be willing to switch so she can sit next to her elderly mother who needs help during the flight. The old version of me would have said no automatically. I paid for my seat. It's not my responsibility to fix other people's problems, but I think about Linda Marsh, about the choice she made that day, about how she valued a stranger's life over her own safety. Of course, I tell the woman, I'd be happy to switch. It's a small thing. Maybe it means nothing, but it feels like the right choice, and that matters. I learned something crucial on that September morning at JFK Airport. Suspicion keeps you safe, but it can also make you blind. My father's lessons about caution were important and valuable, but they were incomplete. Because the world isn't just full of people trying to hurt you. It's also full of people like Linda Marsh. People who see danger and run toward it instead of away. People who risk everything to protect someone they've never met. I don't know how to perfectly balance caution and trust. I'm still figuring that out. But I know I'd rather risk being fooled occasionally than become so suspicious that I can't recognize grace when it's standing right in front of me, begging me to accept it. Linda is somewhere safe now, living under a new name, starting over completely. I'll probably never see her again, but I carry her with me every single day, in every interaction with strangers, in every moment where I have to choose between fear and faith, because 30 minutes taught me what 30 years of careful living never could. Sometimes, the person you trust least is the only one trying to save you. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more real stories about trust, survival, and the unexpected moments that change everything. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because I love hearing from you all.